Hi everyone, my name is Joseph, and welcome to Chapter 3 of Digimon Seekers Part 8, Unit 11, Digital Missing in Action. So finally with Part 8, as an audience, we are caught up to the present timeline. I put present because obviously we're reading elements of the story, but parts 1 through 7 of Chapter 3 were wholly focused on building up how the narrative came to this point, where Tartarus came from, who Tartarus is as an individual, and some of the background information for some of the other characters who have been introduced beyond Iji and Leon. Those characters being specifically Yolin, Koski, not really Saya because we haven't been introduced to her, but indirectly she is connected to Professor Ruzenji, and we find out more, a little bit, tiny bit more about the professor as well. So let's go ahead and get into it with the first quote. She swallowed hard, she being Yolene. Even the vaunted hacker judge and his ultimate lover Kurosaki-mon met with the grim fate after their encounter with the Royal Knight. So really quickly, this part I felt like really went end with the diction that they use. In case one is curious, vaunted, Vaunted, what that essentially means is that when one is boasting a lot, when one is talking about themselves. I would say that Leon is not an arrogant individual, but I would say that Yolene is describing him in a kind of a negative way right here. Even the vaunted hacker judge essentially saying even the self-proclaimed amazing hacker judge suffered when he had his encounter with the Royal Knight. But just wanted to quickly explain that. I wanted to quickly explain that. There's going to be another definition, sophistry, that will be another big word that would be used, sophistry, that we'll discuss later on. But let's continue with this quote. With the grim fate after the encounter with the Royal Knights now more than ever seemed in a class of their own, somewhere above even ultimate level Digimon. The Royal Knights are widely understood to be extremely powerful gatekeeper AI, but that was all anyone knew of them. There was no escape if you were targeted. Any encounter with the Royal Knight was effectively a death sentence. The one surefire way to avoid attracting their attention, a general rule widely circulated among hackers, crackers, and the Digipolice alike, was to avoid trying to peek into the deaths to begin with. So what I like about this quote is that essentially it sets up the Royal Knights to be this really imposing, mysterious entity that's present within the digital world. We've been, the story has mentioned the vortexes and how that has an impact on the digital world. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this might be the first instance where we're starting to now have a direct conversation about the Royal Knights. I feel like the first time the story introduced the Royal Knights was when the vortex appeared whilst Leon and Iji were fighting, and they had to deal with that. Right before that, I don't think there was ever any mention of the Royal Knights. So the fact that we're now aware that they're an entity excuse me, let me start over because I don't like to use the same diction. The fact that the audience knows that the characters within the story is aware about the Royal Knights, I think that's really intriguing. I'm hoping they'll do some more about that. But obviously they don't know too much about them. But maybe they at least know how many there are. They know they're gatekeepers of some sort. Are they protecting something? Maybe. So that's why I liked it. And I also just like this quote as well, because even though it's very minor, the use of vaunted hacker judge, again, I think that's telling of Yolene's character. I think she's the type of individual that doesn't really like individuals who show off. She much prefers walking over talking. In other words, action over words. As long as one is able to back up themselves through their actions, I think she's okay with you. But if you have a tendency to speak whilst doing that action, she might have some choice words about you as an individual. But I don't think she's a bad person, right? Nor is she a judgmental individual. She's just someone who seems to be very much a hard liner. So continuing forward, let me go up a little bit. Why didn't you run once you saw the Royal Knight? Yolene wondered quietly to herself. Evasive maneuvers were the only way to survive an encounter like this. Perhaps she thought they were on the same side. Hackers are committed to justice, protecting Digimon and eradicating code crackers. He might have known they were dangerous, but thought they wouldn't be a threat. It was plausible. She kept reading. Patient reported DMIA by code cracker Iji Nagasami. Iji also reported contact with patient immediately prior to incident at DDL. Yulin looked down at the Digimon linker strap to Leon's wrist. It was the same model as hers, the latest, developed for research purposes by Professor Rugenji himself. just in a different color. That EG also had one. That EC also had, excuse me, that EG also had one, didn't he? What would compel a hacker of his talents to do such a thing? Surely he had as many reasons to avoid danger as to charge headlong into it. So what I appreciate about this line is it's really giving us the audience an insight into how Yolene thinks. She's very an inquisitive individual. Rather than just coming into the hospital room and just taking in the details, right off the bat, she's already trying to understand the details. We, the audience, know that the reason why EG sticked around is because, his confrontation with EG had Leon just went away, he would have just left EG alone, and that's not something that Leon wanted to do, right? Even though Leon and EG were fighting one another, they were coming from a place of care, just from different perspectives. We've already discussed this with chapter 2, right? But Yulene doesn't know about that, right? She's not like us, the audience, where we have Digimon Seekers and we get to see the character's insight and everything like that. And I really love how Yulene, she's trying to understand the situation. She's trying to get out of the context, even if she's not aware about the full context entirely. And I think the reason why that's quite important is because you can't, when I say you, I mean any individual, one can't come to a conclusion and they don't have the full context. And what I appreciate about Yolene is that she's not just judging Leon, just saying, oh, well, this is what he gets. He's always been very, as she says, self-boastful, with the use of the word vaunted. May not be pronouncing that correctly, excuse me. But no, she's not doing that. Rather, she's trying to understand what led Leon to come to this point, what led him to becoming DMIA. So again, I just like this quote because I think it builds a lot to, it gives a lot to Yolene's characterization, and yeah, moving on forward. Sorry, everyone, I got distracted. Let me flip my phone over, and also let me quickly drink some water. I'm starting to sound a little bit like an NPR host. Excuse me. I probably made that joke before, but if anyone's ever seen Parks and Rec, they'll get that reference. Or they do listen to National Public Radio, they'll get that reference. Anywho, continuing forward though, Yolene stared at the feet of her closest friend suspended in some sort of little support capsule and felt nothing. So quick context for this. The professor is showing Yolene the most recent footage of Saya, who again is no longer in Japan. She's actually in America, in a hospital in America, being taken care of. So that's who Yolene is looking at. So Yolene is feeling nothing. She had overcome nothing and was no closer to helping Saya than she was on the day Saya went DMIA. Yolene spent so many nights wallowing in regret, pure agony, then back to regret that it must have broken whatever part of her used to feel. There was a time where she wouldn't have been able to look at this footage. She wouldn't have sought it out, but she couldn't do anything about the fact that she still wouldn't have sought it out, but she couldn't do anything about the fact that Professor Ruzenji has shown it to her now. Sometimes it was easy to forget that he was still a father. Saya had been in that capsule since she was transferred to a specialist in America, asleep but still alive. How many years had it been? A whole new generation of students now studied under her father. Students who would have been babies back when she went missing. You haven't changed a bit, have you, Saya? Meanwhile, I'm looking older every day, Yolene said to the virtual monitor. From what you could see, Saya looked the same as she did the same day she went missing. As far as Yolene was concerned, she was ageless and immortal. Excuse me, that was a hiccup. She recalled something about being in a coma slowly. She recalled something about being in a coma, slowing the body's metabolism to the point that aging itself slowed, then pushed a thought out of her mind. It was probably something she read in some novel or other at some point. What I like about this quote, so at first it sounds like it portrays Yolene in a negative light. She's seeing a footage, of medical footage of her, one of her dear friends, dare I say, maybe even best friends at the time, and yet she's feeling nothing. That's quite literally the word choice that's being used here, and felt ellipses, nothing. Ellipses are the ... But as we continue reading, we discover that the reason why Yolene's not feeling anything is not because she doesn't care, but rather, unfortunately, she cared a little bit too much. She spent so many nights wallowing in regret, pure agony, then going back to regret, and broke whatever part of her used to feel. So essentially, it may sound a little bit cheesy, but the idea of that one may have cried out all their tears, essentially that's what happened right here. Yulin, I'm sure again that a little bit survivor's guilt, maybe not survivor's guilt so much that's the correct term, but I'm sure that Kurosaki and Yulin must have felt some questioning, self-reflective questions about why they were the ones who survived, right? They may have been thinking to themselves, well, it's because Saya showed a lot more progress, but why was she showing progress? Maybe because she was showing so much progress, she should have stayed behind in the lab instead of partaking in field tests. So I don't think that this passage portrays Yolene negatively. I think if anything, it just shows how much why it supports why she's such a hardliner. Why is she the individual who seems a little bit cold, maybe too calculating, and it's because of her experience essentially. She acts overly cautiously, not extra. She acts overly cautiously because of her past experience. So again, it's not that she doesn't care. It's just that at this point she's become numb to the care. I like that a lot. I think it says a lot about Yolene's character. One could probably tell that I am I am enjoying her characters. It's like all these new characters. I end up enjoying them. I liked EG when he was first. Yeah, when he was introduced in part one, I did like him. I enjoyed Leon's character, even when he was kind of portrayed as a little bit cocky and arrogant. I was like, oh, there's a little bit more to this, I'm sure. I really am enjoying Kurosaki as well, Tartarus. Marvin is really cool. Marvin, the songwriter. And now we have even the minor characters. We don't have much information like Katsumi and Satsuki, who we do get a bit more about her at least. I am appreciating all of them. And Yolene too, one can't tell. But yeah, and what I also like about this is that it starts off with her saying that she's not fooling anything, but obviously she still cares enough that she's noticing that Saya hasn't changed. And one could argue that could be something that's just narcissistic. Well, who wouldn't be jealous of someone else who's not aging, right? As one continues to age, your body tends to break down, right? So if your metabolism slows down, who wouldn't be slightly jealous about that, right? But we need to keep in mind the context. Why is Saya not aging? She's not aging because she's in a coma. She's DMIA. So yeah, I just appreciate this. I think it adds a lot to Yolene's characterization. EG is a member of the SOC. He's new, but he's taking on leadership roles. We're aware. He's bested my deputy squad leader. Ah yes, Satsuki, the slug lover. This is off the record and just between us, but I'm a fan of hers. I know all about her secret account where she uploads our slug videos, Professor said with a mischievous grin. Yolene let out a pained sigh. She couldn't tell if he was joking or serious, but didn't care to derail the interview long enough to find out. Tartarus will back EG up. As will I. Seeing as I asked him to join the SOC, he continued, hardening his gaze. The message was clear. Do what you must as part of the Digipolice, but don't get too involved with EG. Are you saying you shield him? Just like I did for you and Koski. Yolene's heart grew heavy. So really quickly, context for this, Yolene is aware that EG is working with the professor. Thankfully, the professor, he's not going to try to lie or worm his way out of the situation. He just wholly admits that yes, he is working with EG. So thus why we have this instance right here where where his gaze becomes hardened and he says that Tartarus would back EG up, as will I, because Yolene was curious to know was it possible that EG was he murderous? Did he have the intent to purposefully put Leon into a coma? Was this part of a plan? Maybe. And so the professor's defending EG right here. So the beginning part of this, what I do appreciate about this quote is how the professor, again, so far one could argue that he is an eccentric person. Where do his loyalties lie? At this point, I think we can safely say that his loyalties lie specifically with Digimon, specifically with researching. Does that mean that he doesn't care about other people? No, right? There's sometimes scientists who they do care about their research, but they don't care about anything beyond that. Is that a good individual, quote unquote good? I would argue no, right? A really good example about this would be like Victor Frankenstein from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, the full title. We have textual evidence from the last part that when push comes to shove, the professor cares not just about his research, but also about the company that he's conducting that research with. So the fact that he's kind of poking fun at Satsuki, I don't think he's poking fun at her to be malicious. Rather, I think he's just showing his human side. If anything, I think he could probably get Satsuki in trouble if he wanted to. He's aware, right? Let's just keep this between us, he tells Yolene. but he's aware about her secret account. Maybe she's using, work technology, work equipment to do that. Um, Maybe we don't know, right? But the point is that the professor's not sharing this with anyone else. He's just sharing it with a close friend, and I would consider Yolene and the professor to be close friends. So I do really appreciate that about him. But despite that, he's still willing to protect those that he maybe not so much cares about, but willing to protect those that he works with, and that is a kind of care. I like how instinctively, not instinctively, he's what's the word I'm looking for? He's Oh, fortunately, I can't recall the word. Not instinctively. Oh, essentially. I guess because essentially rhymes with instinctively. Excuse me. What a basic word to forget too. Not a basic word, but just a common word. Anywho, essentially, the professor is becoming defensive of EG right here, letting Yoli know that no, EG's not a murderer, but beyond that, leave him alone. He's working with me. We're doing something together. We're on a mission, essentially. But I only smile because I think about the Blues Brothers. We're on a mission from God. Anyways, if anyone's seen that movie, then they know what I'm referring to. Anyway, but yes, so, and I like how it ends. Are you saying you shield him? Just like I did for you and Koski. No backing down. The professor really is someone who, when he wants to care for a group, he's going to care for them. And Yolene's heart grew heavy. I would argue that one could argue that the professor won this argument. I'm gonna say that where they weren't really arguing; it was an interview, right? But when it says that Yolene's heart grew heavy, I think that's more nostalgia, quote unquote, more recalling the effort that the professor did in protecting her and Kroski when he didn't need to have done that, right? He could have been wallowing in his own regret because it was his daughter who's DMIA, who went into DMIA. It's his daughter who's in a coma. So I think this quote is twofold. It's highlighting how the professor is a carefree individual, but when it comes to the things that he cares about, well, that's when he'll become a bit more assertive than we're typically used to seeing. Moving forward, they walk very different. Pardon, really quickly, context. The reason why I say we could safely say that the professor cares about Digimons, because I'm not going to read from that quote, but there is a portion in this part where the professor hollowizes a Bedamon on top of, next to Leon on his bed, and Yolene also hollowizes Ryudomon, and she introduces him being Ryudomon to the professor, and Professor Ruzenji says, "Oh, it's such a great pleasure to meet you." And Yolene mentions how the professor's always been quite friendly, or extra friendly towards Digimon. How he always showed a bit more care towards them. So continuing forward, the next quote. They walked different paths, they being Yolene and Koski, following the accident that ended the Tartarus program. Yolene graduated and then made herself scarce, spending some time alone instead of remaining on staff in Professor Ruzenji's lab. She drifted aimlessly, living the life of a code cracker or a hacker, but not caring in the least which label was applied to her. In the end, she was scouted by the police and started working as a white hat hacker. She had the skills, and they were in desperate need of cybersecurity staff. So this quote I think is really cool. I think before this part, we be the audience, if we had envisioned Yolene being really similar to Leon, it wouldn't surprise most of us, right? What I mean by that is Yolene is probably a little bit gung-ho about justice. She's probably a little bit always taking into account the right way to do things. Again, that hardline persona, being a hardliner. One could argue that the reason why Leon is a code cracker, or excuse me, a hacker for right now, is because he's too young and he can't do anything official with his abilities. And so thus Yolene, she has the benefit of graduating. Well, now she could be as righteous as she wants to be, right? But we're finding out right here that she drifted aimlessly, living the life of a code cracker or a hacker. So essentially, with that, as I the reader, what that tells me, or what I'm getting from that, and if anyone wants to disagree with me, please do let me know or put your own perspective. But for me personally, what that tells me is that she was doing both illicit and non-illicit activities, essentially doing things that she goes after individuals for. She didn't really much care as long as she was working. Now, one could argue that this is obviously a reaction to the Saya going DMIA. Maybe before Saya going DMIA, she was a lot more like Leon, but I just like the point that's being made here, that after the incident, Saya didn't become more gung-ho about justice. She didn't become more assertive about wanting to capture those who break the law, or those who misuse the digital world, but rather she just kind of fell into this, and she was just a skilled individual that other groups wanted to utilize that for good, right? I also think it emphasizes how, again, that Yolene did not so much when the story says that she didn't feel anything. It's not that she's not feeling anything because she doesn't care, but rather because, again, she's numb. And I think this is more textual evidence to add to that. But yeah, continuing forward, just one last thing. Why give AG a prototype Digimon and a Digimon linker? To stave off boredom, I suppose. A very fitting answer coming for you, Yolene said with a begrudging smirk. A useful sophistry, even if he was being sincere. So sophistry is a fallacy, which is what a fallacy is. It's a non-argument. It looks like it is an argument. When you try to break it down, it really isn't, because it's appealing to the what's popular. It's appealing to authority. It's appealing to emotion, and so forth. A sophistry is just a fallacy, or again, a non-argument. A useful sophistry, even if he was being sincere. The young will one day surpass whatever my feeble old imagination can conjure, and it's my job to look after them as they take that journey. For the sake of my research, the future of the digital world and the Digimon themselves. Yolene could tell he meant it. The future of Digimon and the digital world. Well, that certainly puts me at ease, Yolene said dryly. The professor let out a little chuckle. Thank you for your time today. Our mission at the Digipolice remains the protection of everyone living within Japan's borders. We'll be asking some questions of Iji Nagasumi with regards to our investigation of Leon Alexander's DMIA. I must say I'm glad, Professor Regency interjected. I'm glad that people still want to explore the depths of the digital world. It doesn't matter to me who gets there, be they a hacker, a code cracker, the police, the government. He continued to act as though he were petting Betamon. Sorry? Yolene asked, taken it back at the interruption. I couldn't stop Koski if I wanted to. Only you can do that, Yolene. So this quote, I think, does a whole lot. To stave off boredom, I suppose, a very fitting answer coming from you. So use of sophistry, even if he was being sincere. I think what this is saying is that the professor, he is an eccentric individual, and sometimes maybe he is, or he does do some of the things that he does because he is bored. But in this instance, that's not necessarily the case. But he doesn't want to detail the real answer. I am quite curious as well, because when the story first started, we know that the professor wanted EG to work with the Sons of Chaos and to infiltrate them to discover their true goal. But now we know that the professor's aware who Tartarus is. We know that the professor's not really trying to save Tartarus per se. So what is the professor's goal specifically? He obviously knows something that other individuals in the story don't know. And I am quite curious about that. But again, I don't think it's going to be a bad objective, what it is that the professor's trying to go forward. But even though he's not willing to share in full detail with Yolene currently, I like how he expands upon his answers. So to save off the boredom, that may have been a non-answer, but he kind of shares some elements of the real answer. How the young will one day surpass whatever feeble imagination that he can conjure, and it's his job to look after them as they take that journey. I can't help but wonder if he's saying this because of what he knows. Is he aware that maybe there's a countdown of some sort where the end of the digital world means the end of the real world? Or maybe again, it might just overthinking this. It's just nothing. But I do like how, for me at least, he goes from a non-answer to kind of giving a semi-answer. Again, not the full answer, because I don't think he wants to divulge that quite yet. But he also doesn't want to keep Yolene in the dark. And hence why Yolene could tell that he meant it, the stuff that he was saying currently. So for Yolene, even though it kind of seems like she's getting a non-answer, she wants to finish this interview, but she doesn't hold any qualms. She doesn't hold any negative or any ill will towards the professor, because she could tell that he's being honest. He's being as sincere as he could be. And she's also aware that he's protecting EG. So thank you for your time. Our interview is over. And then when he says, I'm glad that people still want to explore the depths of the digital world. It doesn't matter to me who gets there, be they a hacker, a code cracker, the police, the government. I think at this instance, the professor's still thinking about his full answer that he can't give to Yolene. And so he's kind of giving, again, that semi-answer. And thus, this is part of whatever he's doing. I think it is in service to helping Koski. Might not be the primary objective. Might be a secondary objective by doing his go. Hence why he says, I couldn't stop Koski if I wanted to. Only you can do that, Yolene. So this really does a great job, I think, of highlighting the eccentricity of the professor. But despite his eccentric antics, there's still a lot of care and, dare I say, love presence there. really looking forward to finding out what it is the professor knows, and I'm really still hopeful that they being the writers, aren't going to go down the path of the professor being an antagonist or some kind of support for the antagonist. As we continue forward, we'll see what happens. And since we're talking about the professor, I'm also quite curious about where Tentomon and Palmon are at. Really quickly, I'm actually quite hopeful that in the future, maybe this it will come to the point where Yolene is working with Iji, is working with Koski. Leon's back, right? So Leon is back, but they're all losing. They're fighting the antagonistic, whoever the antagonist of the story, whoever that may be. And then it looks like the protagonists are going to lose, and all of a sudden the professor's like, don't worry guys, backup is coming. And then Palmon and Tentomon come out. And Koski and Yolene are like, oh my gosh, yes! Right? They're so excited to see them. No, that's super cheesy, but I wouldn't mind if something like that occurs. But going forward, we're almost done with the quotes I want to look at. Oh, pardon me, that actually was the last quote I want to look at. Excuse me, I'm doing this, usually I have a bunch of tabs open and I have the quotes that I have highlighted, but it gets to the point where I have to keep opening new ones. This morning, I was impatient and I just opened up a lot of them, so I made the assumption that these other tabs were also quotes. So this was the last one. So I guess I'll reread the last part because I do like it. Sorry, Yolene asked, taken aback. I'm glad that people still want to explore the depths of the digital world. It doesn't matter to me who gets there, be they a hacker, a code cracker, the police, the government. He continued to act as though he were pitting Betamon. Sorry, Yolene asked, taken aback at the interruption. I couldn't stop Koski if I wanted to. Only you can do that, Yolene. With that, her phone rang. She hastily excused herself and answered the call. Go ahead, Satsuki. Right now, I'm at DDL. Why? What? Something very strange was going on in the digital world. I decided to read that last part since it was the last quote anyways. And what anticipation do I have for the next part? I'm anticipating whatever it is that's causing this disturbance. Is it a connection to the vortex? Or maybe we must forget the end of chapter 2. It kind of seemed like Logomon, maybe not a plan, but Logomon definitely looked like he was a bit more assertive. Maybe not a bit more, a lot more assertive compared to Iji. Maybe this is something that they have done, right? Or maybe it's just a random instance. Maybe now that the vortex, whoever controls these vortexes, now that they have two human consciousness, I'm sorry, I was gonna say excuse me, Saya and Leon, maybe now it's starting to become active, proactive. Maybe now it has its own agenda. And finally, the next part, we being the audience, we're going to discover who the true antagonist is. So I am quite excited that we're back to the modern part. I'm also actually excited that the story is moving forward. Although it did take quite a while, 8 parts for us to finally get the story continuing forward. At first, again, I did really enjoy the flashbacks that was occurring. I did become a bit impatient with the flashbacks, but I think that was more an issue with myself rather than with the storytelling. And now that we're back with the present timeline, I'm really looking forward to how everything's going to be remedied. The fact that Koski and Yolene they used to be friends. I'm really hoping that that's going to come into play in the future, that they're going to start working together. If anyone's ever played the Legend of Heroes video game series, then one might be aware that's not uncommon. Or rather, one might be aware how cool it could be when those who are enemies become allies. So I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen in that regard. And then, of course, this mysterious Black Agumon. We've heard of Tentomon, Palmon, and Agumon, but all we've heard about this Black Agumon was at the start of the story, someone looking for a Black Agumon. Maybe this incident that's going on, something strange going on in the digital world, maybe it's in reference to this Black Agumon. So thank you so much for watching or listening. I really do appreciate it. My question for today is, how excited are you to be back on the present timeline? I know some weren't as happy about the flashbacks, while others were a little bit more neutral. So I would like to know your opinion about that. And again, thank you so much for listening and watching. I really do appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone, or rather have a prodigious day. And I guess a bonus question, since this week was the release of Digimon Adventure 2, the beginning. Did you watch the movie? If you did, what was your opinion about that? I'll for sure be making a separate video about that. But my quick answer to that for myself is I saw it and I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it a lot. Not as much as Kuzina, but I did enjoy it still. Again, thank you everyone. Take care and have a great day.